Hello, thank you for being here with me today. Let me introduce myself. My name is Alberto Pombo. I'm a marine biologist, uh, master in marine ecology, PhD in social ecology. I'm a retired professor, captain. I had a U.S. Coast Guard captain's license, and I travel the world uh, looking for ideas or trying to figure out how uh, humans and nature and how did our society came to be for the past 25 years or 30 about. I worked with water and sanitation in poverty, in urban areas. And my subject was water and sanitation techniques. So I did a lot of research on water sanitation. This idea of making this kind of videos came after I tried to apply for a environmental in cruise ships companies. Uh, it didn't work that well. I made a video, the first time I ever made a video. Uh, I live alone. I live with two cats, so I had to do everything on my own, and I had to learn. Uh, and this is what I'm doing now. Uh, but in those days, when I did that video, it wasn't that good. So the company, I did everything. They were nice with me at the beginning, and then they asked me for a video, and that showed my presentation. And when I sent it to them, they said, "Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Uh, we will contact you in the future. We wish you good luck, and don't call us again." So yeah, the video was not good. So now I'm trying to improve that and see if it works for me. My idea is to start with this channel about ancient history, about the Caribbean, means trying to put in a series most of my experiences, uh, which I had some, uh, into videos in presentations that can entertain people. I'm going to talk about something that is, for some people, maybe a little of controversial, but it's a part of the history. As a scientist, when I start to realize that how dangerous waterborne diseases were, I start to figure out how did people in antiquity survive. In other words, how was possible that for many, many years, those ships sailed for months at a time with a really bad water supply. The water on board was full of pathogens and they survived. How they did it? Was it something that some ability that we lost today? In the past, the sailors were more afraid of disease, especially scurvy, than of parrots or storms. So disease was a major issue. And doing my research, I started to find out that uh, that problem was kind of solved since antiquity. If we and that was using a disinfectant that is quite common, and it was available to very early humans, and that was alcohol. At the same time that we humans started to uh, grind those grains of flour, of wheat or barley or whatever, and we left them for a while. Eventually, we found out that that mixture of flour, water grew. If we added that to water, well, we had something that we call nowadays beer. Beer and bread were two of the main inventions, because that's an invention that humans in our development had. Uh, Greeks, Romans, means Mediterranean. Every time we find a sunken ship, wreckage, we found big wine amphora. They all traded, their ships always carried uh, wine. Later on, uh, during the Middle Ages, uh, wine was substituted by beer uh, because, well, Nordic tribes were not used to that much to wine. But still, alcohol was a major component of sea traveling, of commerce, sea trade. At one point during history, we don't know exactly, the Hanseatic League standardized the beer and added this compound, hops. Hops have the ability to raise the alcohol content and, most important, make that beer survive during hot weather, hot temperatures. So they made it more resistant to spoilage. These are the ancestors of modern day IPAs, India Pale Ale, that we all drink in the bars. But every time that you have one glass of IPA beer, we are having a glass of maritime history. Beer was very important, was crucial for trade and traveling before the 18th century. Vikings carried malt in their ships so they could make beer on the go, or when they arrived to some place, they could grab water from whatever source they had, make beer, and in the process, they that means the process of fermentation, they killed all pathogens. So they could stay healthy and drink healthy water. Uh, when British sailed around Africa and they went to India, they found out that in the very early trips they had problem with the beer because they would go bad, they were spoiled, and they found that the answer was already there. The Hanseatic League already had a solution, which was add more hops. Uh, so those solutions made possible the travel. Uh, in the 1620, when the Mayflower came to America, pilgrims had the manifest. They carried more beer than water. Why is that? Well, beer, again, in those days, was a lot safer than contaminated water. Uh, Beer was what people used to rehydrate, so provide hydration. They also added calories. We all know if we drink too much beer, we end up with a belly beer. And it was used by even the Royal Navy established a quota. Every sailor above the age of 20 will receive 1 gallon a day of beer. What happens with the beer? Why is so important? Well, uh, before we understood the germ theory, remember that germ theory It's only 1860, Pasteur. Before that, we don't know. We didn't make the link between water, disease, and whatever was in the water. It was only after Pasteur, I mean, 1860 about, that we figured out that the water itself was dangerous. What happens when you have when you add yeast and soft drink, I mean, grains of any kind? Well, that fermentation takes over the whole volume of that water and kills absolutely everything. Not absolutely, but it's a very good uh, disinfectant. Yeast produces a toxic. So that's why we say that people who are drunk are intoxicated. Yeah, it's a toxic that we humans can kind of survive. Well, it's not that toxic to us, but for bacteria, protozoa, and disease germs, well, yes, it is very dangerous. So at the time, 1620, uh, it was true. The popular belief was that beer was a lot safer than water. That lasted many, many years, but in the 17th century, uh, after the discovery of America, after we had these major sugarcane plantations, we start to have distilled products, distilled alcohol. Uh, the beauty of those distilled compounds, rum mostly, is that you can disinfect water with a far smaller volume. So instead of having to carry 1 gallon per day per sailor, now you have to carry a far smaller uh, volume. The In 1655, Royal Navy substituted that beer for rum. Uh, Even without the Royal Navy, means they carried beer. But remember, that beer spoiled really fast. And that's the beauty of alcohol, doesn't spoil fast. We all have our bottle of beer, we all drink this pasteurized beer today. Pasteur, 1860 something. Remember that those days were when Abraham Lincoln was president. It's not so long ago that he did that. He didn't do the pasteurization for beer. Excuse me, for milk. We'll drink uh, pasteurized milk. That's all we find in the supermarket, or most of the time. And he did it for the beer, and it was a major success. He figured out how to stop fermentation, how to stop the biological processes inside the beer, so it could last longer. But it was only 1860, so it took a long time. Before that, there were two things available. Was one, the wine. Wine lasts a lot longer once it's uh, removed from air. So once you put it in a bottle and you remove close with the cork, the process of fermentation doesn't continue, ends most of the time. We will talk a little bit about it later. But a high content alcohol, distilled alcohol, has the advantage that doesn't spoil. So immediately the Crown, the Royal Navy, switched to this rum because they had plenty of it. It was cheap. Uh, the establishment of sugarcane plantations in the Caribbean was what fueled this infamous triangle where ships will go to Africa, pick up slaves, bring them to America, to sugarcane plantations, and then they will go back to Europe carrying sugar and rum. Mm. Unfortunately, this that made wealthy several nations, and the trade was fueled by large numbers of slaves. The conditions were really bad, and the attrition rate and speed at which slaves died was very high. And well, unfortunately, that's why those traders became so wealthy. Uh, in that process, the slaves discovered that one byproduct of sugar means they cut the sugar cane and they boiled it and then well, a little process and separated the crystals to the molasses. So molasses was a byproduct not so well regarded at the time. And slaves figured out that by working with that, they could make something very strong. Means by distilling that product, they could make something very strong. And that was the origin of the molasses rum. Uh, uh, the rising demand for sugar and molasses fueled that. It was the uh, incentive, the mechanism that fueled the growth of the Caribbean. Uh, during those days there were two major kind of rums, uh, always based on sugarcane. One was the molasses, the British pot stills, and the other one was something more simple. They simply ground the sugarcane, they let it ferment and distilled, which was uh, the agriculture uh, rum that was quite common in Martinique, in the French colonies mostly. Uh, it became so popular that rum immediately replaced the French brandy as the exchange currency in Africa. So once the rum was discovered, immediately took over most of the market for, as I said, several reasons. It's strong, last forever, not forever, but will not spoil in long voyages. It has a good disinfectant power, uses small size, I mean, it doesn't use that much cargo space because in a cargo ship, especially in those days, imagine when you had to carry 1 gallon of beer per sailor per day, hmm, you have a large size of your cargo uh, occupied by the needs of the crew. With a bottle, you pretty much substitute everything else. Uh, by the 18th century, it was established, and there were some colonies like Barbados, Jamaica, uh, that even today are still producing rum. It means the wealth of those that trade was so powerful. Imagine now, if it's powerful today, imagine in those days how powerful it was. It was a big money making operation. Um, Martinique, Guadeloupe, they specialize in the other kind of rum, the agricultural rum. Again, we are talking a lot of money being made, and it's made today. We all still drink rums made in Martinique or Guadeloupe. And the yeah, it means when you make rum, it's a distill thing. Every time you have distillation, you have what is called the head, the body, and the tail. The head, you have to throw it away because it has several very nasty alcohol, especially the uh, methylic alcohol, which is completely toxic. So you have the body, and then you have the tail. The tail, you can reuse it. You can mix it again with another fermented, and you can reuse part of it. It has a lot of flavor in that part. But that middle, you produce a very high content alcohol. That very high content alcohol just is too much, really too much to drink. It's almost pure alcohol. So you have to reduce it. So pure alcohol, we are talking, is probably 96, 98% of alcohol. So you have to reduce it to about, every drink that we have today is about 45, 48, pretty much. Well, essentially 50-50. So you have to mix it with water. But how much is enough? How much is too much? So if you are a producer, you will try to stretch your volume as much as possible. And you will try to sell it to, remember, the Royal Navy was a major customer. So they will go to different ports and they will trade or talk with traders. And how can you tell if it's good or not? If it's powerful or not? Because they had standards. Well, they invented, in those days, a very intelligent or clever way. They mixed gunpowder, using the cannons, with rum. They will let it sit there for a while, and with a torch, they will try to ignite the powder. If the gunpowder ignited, it means that the rum was pretty much of good standard. If it did not ignite, it was mostly water. So we still use the term proof with alcohol. Well, in those days, had a very important meaning. Proof meant that it did go through it, survive the proof. It ignited. Uh, the problem with that rum, that as I said was by then was a substitute of beer, was that if you drink too much, you're drunk. And a drunkard sailor is a problem everywhere. Uh, to start with, discipline problems. Then they are more prone to accidents. And if you have a drunken sailor on top of a mast and is completely drunk and is moving the boat, it could fall anytime. And it's a loss. So you don't want that. So this admiral in 1740, he was nicknamed Old Grog, introduced a cocktail that had enormous, massive geopolitical implications. Uh, he mixed rum, water, and lime or lemon juice, uh, and water, uh, in a very precise proportions. Uh, what happened with this? What's the result? First of all, you didn't have that many drunkard sailors anymore. They could drink disinfected water and not get drunk. And improve discipline, reduce the incidence of scurvy. Although we didn't understand exactly how it worked with vitamins, vitamin C, But it was found that sailors or who had access to fruits, especially lemon or lime, because again, lime was a fruit that could last for a very long time in a ship. So they could carry that. They will dry the skin, but the interior will still remain with juice. Those will reduce that vitamin C will reduce the incidence of scurvy, which was one of the most feared diseases in the sea in those days. Uh, that in turn improved the discipline. So the introduction of this cocktail in 1740 improved the discipline, improved the health of the crews, and that allowed the British Empire to fight these many wars with healthy crews. So improve the health of naval warfare. And it was so effective that it became a tradition. Uh, grog, the mixture, was 71 milliliters. It says, I don't know if you can see it here. So this is the size of a 1/8 of a pint. So every sailor between 10, excuse me, between 11 and 12 will receive one of these a day, plus water. Well, water was on board, and sugar and lime. Sailors under 20, they were excluded, or sailors who did not want to drink alcohol, they will receive a payment. They will receive the money for it. Uh, Pirates in the Caribbean, they rejected grog. It was sissies. This grog is for sissies. So they drank straight rum. But that tradition was very powerful. That's one of the secret weapons that allowed the British Empire to conduct, to wage that successful wars around the world. There was another drink that was around at the time that was the toddy, that was fermented palm sap from India, that also provided vitamin C. It was not that popular, but that, especially in the Caribbean during those days, was used quite often. It was so important, so useful, the grog, that it lasted till July 31st, 1970. That is known as Black Tot Day. In that date, the last ration of rum was delivered to the British Royal Navy sailors. So we are talking several centuries, at least two, pretty much 3 centuries, that rum was the secret weapon of the British Empire. Uh, Now we have to talk about another drink that does not spoil, and that's wine. But it does spoil. Depends on the temperature. When it's bottled, scored, if the wine receives too much heat, it will spoil. So it was a problem. It was a problem how to keep those wines because it was very popular. Well, the idea probably in Spain and Portugal, we don't know exactly, uh, was to add some high content alcohol, distilled alcohol, brandy. Uh, and that became the trademark of Portugal and Spanish wines in the trade, fortified wine. It was so important that the first treaty of Portugal with after their independence from Spain was the Methuen Treaty, that essentially it's a free trade agreement between Britain and uh, Portugal that allowed British textiles to enter Portugal tax free or under favorable circumstances. And Portugal sent their fortified wine to England. Uh, Even today, uh, these fortified wines are a major industry, especially in Portugal. Vinho de Roda or Tornaviagem is around the ship. They were uh, they were particularly significant in the trade, and they did send casks of wine across the equator for centuries. That practice ended in about the 20th century. So the wine will feel the heat, will take the character needed. Nowadays, they still do something like that. They heat, they have a special chamber, they have a special treatment to their wines, so they resemble those of the Pirate Age. If you go to Porto in Portugal, one of the main things is to go down the Douro River in those barges that they used to bring wine from the farms up the river, and then you have the wineries there, and well, it's very interesting tourist attraction is to go and see those wineries and the process. And you can still buy a bottle if you have the money, but if you don't have the money, you can have a sip of a taste of those fortified wines that are still being produced today. And as a matter of fact, lately in the last few years, there has been a resurgence of those uh, uh, enthusiasts. So wine, fortified wine is becoming more and more mainline, mainstream. Uh, with this, I will finish this presentation, and if you liked it, uh, please let me know so I can have another presentation. I can prepare another presentation, and eventually, and I can correct whatever it is that you didn't like. As I said, these are tests. These are ideas that I'm putting together. I don't have the equipment. As I say, I live alone with two cats, which are both around here. Uh, and technically, I'm learning. This is a learning curve, and see if I can produce at one point a decent 45-minute video. Again, thank you. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you soon in another video.